After heading back to Scunthorpe, the place where it all started for me, in what can only be described as a Rocky and Rocky 3 moment, regaining the eye of the tiger. But instead of Apollo Creed, I had Ella training me. And yes, that is a Sainsbury's bag full of balls. I do have a basket, but I forgot it. I was told to immediately put my shirt back on after Ella witnessed the lack of tan in the midsection, and went as far to say that I looked like the human equivalent of a squashy. I then told Ella exactly where I wanted the balls to be fed. I was just surprised they didn't end up in my face. So it's time to get to work. Now this session was all about my forehand. I wanted to make it into a bigger weapon by the time I next competed. Now to get more power, to get more spin, you actually have to try less physically. So I was just trying to use my whole body, stay loose, get my whole body through the ball. That's the tricky thing, especially when you start to get a little bit tired. You start to force it a little bit with your arm. So this is why I was just doing this exercise for over an hour, just so when I got tired, I was still able to stay loose. And Ella trying not to get bored. So after hitting pretty well from a static position, I started to add some movement. So I just went 2 forehands in the cross and then an inside out or an inside in. It's so important to practice the movement, working on a shot. As soon as you get the feel, then add some movement, because as soon as you get in a match, that's what it's going to be like. Just a big emphasis on when you're feeling a little bit tired, just to stay completely relaxed with the body. Don't try too hard, let it come naturally. So 1 hour in, I was probably a little bit tired and Ella was definitely bored, but we kept going and I was really starting to feel my forehand. It started to become very easy to generate pace and spin, and the movement around the ball and the way I was using my body was just starting to really flow. I was starting to feel really happy with the work. I remember 15 years ago, this is the place where I started out. These were my first real practice sessions were, and even though the nets are gone, the courts aren't used anymore, I still love being here. It brings back a lot of great memories about tennis. This is where I played some of my first matches, and even won some of them. Each time I come back here, it just reminds me of why I love playing tennis and why I want to carry on. I remember that I used to practice with some of the club members for 3 or 4 hours in a row. We'd copy drills from YouTube that I saw pros doing, play 2 against 1, and sometimes they would even stay behind and feed me balls out of a basket for an hour. And I remember coming up here with my dad when I had no one to hit with, and I just practiced my serve for an hour and would film it and compare it to Federer's. That's why I look like a B-Tech Rog. At the age of 13, my parents started to take me up and down the country for training and tournaments, often sacrificing their own free time to do so, something that I'm very grateful for. I always say that tennis is the easy part. Everything around it is difficult. When I was 15, I started training at David Lloyd Lincoln 3 times a week, but I would still train in Scunthorpe whenever I could. But when I look back, I can say it's all been worth it. Right, origin story over. Back to the training. I'd done about 2.5 hours on court, so time to refuel with some lunch and get ready for the gym session in the afternoon. So we headed to the fine Germanic supermarché that is Lidl. Picked up some vegan sushi, and yes, I did smash that whole loaf of bread. Then we headed to the gym where Ella conveniently works as a PT. Fueled up with the sushi and a smoothie. I tried to sneak some extra nutritional supplements, but Ella said no. And after reading a quote from the Messiah himself, I set to work in the gym. I wanted to build up a lot of strength in my lower body just to prevent me from getting injured. I try and make sure that my workouts in the gym are as specific to tennis as possible. So a lot of single leg work. I won't lift really heavy, but I'll try and shift the weight quickly, just to build up a little bit of speed and explosive power that's crucial for tennis. As tennis is a sport that requires the use of pretty much your whole body, variety in your exercises is key. I'll try and use a mixture of bodyweight exercises, plyometrics, and weightlifting. And I try and get all the work done within an hour, just to make sure it's at the right intensity. I feel like if I do any more before a rest, then the quality starts to dip. Don't get me wrong, the hour that I do is pretty intense. You wouldn't really want to do more of it. I pretty much go from exercise to exercise. I don't really take a huge amount of rest. And I always make sure after a workout like this that I have a high carb and protein intake afterwards. Just helps with the recovery so much. That and coffee. I typically eat around 3,000 to 4,000 calories per day, and my diet is pretty clean. It has to be to stay fit and keep muscle mass. And yes, I do train to the Rocky soundtrack. If you haven't guessed, I'm a bit of a fan. So that pretty much concludes my training for the day. I've done around 3.5 hours, and I feel pretty good.
Ooh, great ass.
As ever, I really appreciate your feedback, so feel free to drop a comment below, and I'll see you next time.